What you are about to hear is a story about assumptions. It's about the silent judgments we make in the blink of an eye based on the clothes someone wears, the color of their skin, or the perceived weight of their wallet. This isn't just a cautionary tale. It's a brutal dissection of modern prejudice set 35,000 feet in the air. It involves a single flight, a quiet man in a simple hoodie, and a multi-billion-dollar decision that would shatter 4 careers before the luggage even hit the carousel. But the story doesn't end there. What happened after the firing is where the real hard karma begins twisting fates in ways no one could have ever predicted. The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 was thick with the usual cocktail of human anxiety floor polish and overpriced coffee. It was a symphony of controlled chaos. The rolling thunder of suitcases, the staccato announcements of final boarding calls, and the murmur of 1,000 different life stories converging for a fleeting moment. Among them was Messiah Thorne. To any casual observer, he was utterly unremarkable, a ghost in the machine of modern travel. He wore a simple charcoal grey hoodie, the fabric soft and slightly faded from years of comfortable wear. His jeans were clean, but not new, and his sneakers were a well-known brand, but scuffed at the toes from actual use, not purchased for style. He carried no designer luggage, no flashy briefcase. Just a worn leather backpack slung over one shoulder containing a laptop, a paperback novel, and a change of clothes. He was tall with a lean, athletic build that the baggy hoodie mostly concealed. And he was black. In the stratified world of air travel, this combination of attributes placed him in the eyes of many into a specific prejudged category. He was not a threat, not a nuisance, just invisible. He was part of the background scenery, another face in the economy line. Today, that was precisely the point. He approached the chaotic boarding gate for Apex Air Flight 712 to Los Angeles. Apex was a recent acquisition for his portfolio, a legacy carrier that had been bleeding money for a decade, plagued by aging fleets, union disputes, and a corporate culture that had grown complacent and sour. Most financial analysts had called the purchase a fool's errand, a vanity project for the enigmatic billionaire Messiah Thorne, founder and CEO of Etherian Labs, a company that had revolutionized data processing and artificial intelligence. They didn't understand. For Messiah, Apex Air wasn't about vanity. It was about seeing if a system built on human interaction could be fixed. He believed you couldn't understand a company from a boardroom. You had to feel it from the ground up. So here he was, flying incognito in a standard economy seat he'd booked under a nondescript name, Mark Johnson. The trouble began before he even stepped on the plane. The gate agent, a woman named Brenda, with a severe blonde bob and a name tag that read Brenda Schmidt Customer Service Supervisor, was orchestrating the boarding process with the iron-fisted authority of a drill sergeant. The call was for first-class and diamond-tier members. A small, self-important line formed. Messiah, holding his simple boarding pass for Zone 4, stood well back observing. He watched Brenda's face transform as she greeted the passengers in the priority lane. Her smile was wide and bright, her voice a syrupy, sweet melody. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Henderson. So good to see you again. Mrs. Albright, I love that scarf. Have a wonderful flight." Then a young couple, clearly excited for their vacation, accidentally strayed into the priority lane. Brenda's smile vanished, replaced by a mask of cold impatience. "Excuse me," she snapped, her voice dropping 10 degrees. "This lane is for first-class passengers. The line for main cabin forms back there." She gestured vaguely with a pen, not even making eye contact before turning back to the next first-class passenger with her dazzling smile instantly restored. Messiah logged the interaction in his mind. Discrepancy in treatment. Demeanor based entirely on ticket class. When Zone 4 was finally called, Messiah joined the slow-moving queue. As he reached the front, he handed his pass to Brenda. She took it without a glance at his face, her eyes fixed on the scanner. It beeped. "Sir," she said, her tone flat and tired. He looked up, meeting her gaze. For a fraction of a second, her eyes flickered over his hoodie and his backpack, a micro-expression barely perceptible of dismissal. "Can I see your carry-on?" He gestured to his backpack. "This is it." She sighed an exaggerated put-upon sound. "The overhead bins are likely full by now. We're offering complimentary gate checking for the remainder of the boarding process." It wasn't a question. It was a directive. "I'd prefer to keep it with me," Messiah said politely. "It has my laptop in it, and it fits easily under the seat." Brenda's eyes narrowed. "Sir, it will be much easier for everyone if you just check it. It saves space and speeds up boarding." Her subtext was clear. You and people like you are the reason boarding is slow. "I understand," Messiah replied, his voice still even. "But I'll be working on my laptop during the flight. I'm sure I can make it fit." For a moment it seemed like she would argue further. He could see the internal calculation in her eyes. Is this guy worth the hassle? She decided he wasn't. With a huff, she stamped his pass and handed it back, her parting shot delivered with a saccharine fake smile. "Well, please try not to block the aisle. Have a pleasant flight." Messiah nodded, offered a simple "thank you," and walked down the jet bridge. The air inside the tunnel was stale. He could feel Brenda's judgmental gaze on his back. He wasn't angry. Not yet. He was collecting data. And the data so far was poor. He stepped onto the aircraft, a Boeing 787, that showed its age in the slightly worn seat fabric and the faint, lingering smell of industrial cleaner. He was greeted at the door by 2 flight attendants. The senior of the 2, a woman in her late 40s with perfectly coiffed auburn hair and a name tag that read Beatrice Vance, offered a cursory, tight-lipped smile that didn't reach her eyes. The younger one, a man named Leo, seemed nervous but earnest. "Welcome aboard," Beatrice chirped, her eyes scanning his ticket. 28B, a middle seat in the heart of economy. Her eyes flicked up to his face, then down to his clothes, the same micro-expression of dismissiveness he'd seen on Brenda's face. The smile became even more strained. "Right down this aisle to your left." She immediately turned her attention to the woman behind him, who was dressed in a tailored business suit. "Welcome to Apex Air," Beatrice said, her voice instantly warming, her smile genuine. "Can I help you with your rollerboard?" Messiah continued down the narrow aisle, finding his row. A woman was already in the window seat, and a large man was in the aisle. Messiah gave a small, apologetic smile. "Excuse me, I'm just in the middle here." The man in the aisle seat, clearly annoyed at having to move, heaved himself up with a groan. Messiah slid into 28B, the seat feeling cramped before he even sat down. He stowed his backpack under the seat in front of him with ease, noting with a touch of irony that there was still plenty of space in the overhead bin, directly above him. Brenda's insistence had been a pure power play. As the final passengers boarded, he watched Beatrice and Leo work the cabin. Beatrice moved with an air of practiced disdain through the economy section, her interactions brief and clipped. She was a different person in the forward cabins. Messiah could hear her laughter echoing from the business class section, her tone light and friendly. She was a performer, and economy class was not an audience she cared to impress. Leo was different. He seemed genuinely overwhelmed, but was trying his best, offering patient help to an elderly woman struggling with her bag and answering a young boy's questions about the airplane with a kind smile. He was, however, clearly under Beatrice's thumb. A few times Messiah saw Beatrice give Leo a sharp look or a quiet corrective word, pulling him back into line with her own jaded brand of service. The cabin doors were sealed. The captain's voice, smooth and confident, came over the PA system. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Robert Miller. On behalf of the entire crew, welcome aboard Apex Air Flight 712 with non-stop service to Los Angeles." Messiah settled into his seat. The plane began its slow taxi toward the runway. He wasn't Mark Johnson, the Invisible Man, in 28B. He was Messiah Thorne, the owner of this airline. And this flight, he suspected, was going to be very, very educational. The ascent was smooth, a powerful, rumbling climb through the grey New York clouds into the brilliant, unending blue of the stratosphere. Below, the world shrank into a patchwork of fields and towns. Inside the aluminum tube, a miniature society with its own rigid class structure was settling in for the next 6 hours. Once the seatbelt sign pinged off, the cabin crew began their service. For Messiah, the true test of his airline's culture was about to begin. He pulled out his laptop, intending to work. He wasn't just feigning it. Etherian Labs was in the middle of a delicate negotiation, and he needed to review the latest term sheets. The service cart, laden with drinks and miniature bags of pretzels, began its slow journey down the aisle, piloted by Beatrice and Leo. Beatrice was at the helm, her face a carefully constructed mask of professional indifference. "Drinks?" she asked the woman at the window seat, her voice devoid of warmth. "Just a water, please," the woman said. Beatrice poured the water. She turned to Messiah. "And for you?" The question was clipped. "I'll have a coffee, please." "Black," Messiah replied, looking up from his screen. Beatrice's eyes flickered to his laptop, a high-end, custom-built machine, whose sleek, minimalist design screamed expense to anyone who knew what to look for. But to Beatrice it was just a screen illuminating the face of a man in a hoodie. She saw what she wanted to see. She poured the coffee into a paper cup and placed it on his tray table with a soft thud. There was no, "Here you go." No smile, just the transaction. She then turned to the man in the aisle seat. "Anything to drink, sir?" "Yeah, I'll take a ginger ale. And hey, any chance you guys have any of those little cheese boxes?" "I'm starving," the man said jovially. Beatrice's demeanor shifted instantly. It was subtle, but Messiah, a master at reading people, saw it clearly. A slight softening of her features, a more engaged tone. This man with his polo shirt and confident air registered differently to her. "Of course," she said, her voice a little warmer. "I'll just have to check if we have any left after we serve the comfortless cabin, but I will do my best to bring one back for you." She had created a sense of exclusivity, of doing him a special favor. Messiah knew for a fact from the catering manifests he had reviewed just last week that this flight was stocked with more than enough snack boxes for the entire plane. It was another small, unnecessary power play. An hour into the flight, Messiah was deep in his work when he felt a tap on his shoulder. It was Beatrice. "Sir," she said, her voice laced with an authority that bordered on accusation, "I need you to put the laptop away." Messiah looked up, confused. "Is there a problem? We're at cruising altitude." "The gentleman in the aisle seat," she said, gesturing with her head, "needs to use the lavatory. Your tray table is in his way." The man in the aisle seat looked embarrassed. "Sorry, man. I can wait if you're in the middle of something." "It's no problem at all," Messiah said to the man, beginning to close his laptop. But Beatrice wasn't finished. She spoke to Messiah as if the other man wasn't there. "It's policy that the aisle remains clear. When you're in a middle seat, you need to be considerate of others. Perhaps it would be better if you did your work when it's more convenient for those around you." The condescension was staggering. She wasn't just asking him to clear the way. She was lecturing him on etiquette, implying he was the problem. The accusation of inconsideration from a woman who had demonstrated none herself was a bitter irony. "I understand," Messiah said, his voice dangerously calm. He closed his laptop, folded the tray table, and stood up in the narrow space to let the man out. He waited patiently in the aisle, ignoring the resentful glares from Beatrice. When the man returned, Messiah sat back down. He didn't reopen his laptop. He couldn't. The moment had broken his concentration. The frustration was no longer academic. It was personal. This wasn't just poor service. This was a culture of disrespect, and Beatrice was its high priestess. Later, the lunch service began. It was a choice of a turkey sandwich or a vegetarian pasta salad. When the cart reached their row, Leo was now leading. "Hi there," he said a little more cheerfully than Beatrice. "Lunch today is a turkey sandwich or a pasta salad." "I'll have the pasta salad, please," said the woman by the window. Leo handed it to her. He turned to Messiah. Before Messiah could speak, Beatrice, who was trailing Leo and ostensibly supervising him, spoke up from behind the cart. "We only have a few of the salads left, Leo," she said, her voice loud enough for the surrounding rows to hear. "We should probably save them for the passengers in the back, who pre-ordered special meals." It was a blatant lie. There was no such pre-order system for standard economy meals. She was inventing a rule on the spot to deny him a choice. Why, Messiah could only surmise it was another petty assertion of power, another way to put the man in the hoodie in his place. Leo looked flustered. "Oh. Sorry, sir. Looks like it's just the turkey sandwich for you." Messiah looked past Leo and met Beatrice's gaze. Her expression was one of bland triumph. He felt a cold anger coalesce in his chest, but his face remained a mask of neutrality. He was a shark, and he knew not to thrash in the water until it was time to strike. "The turkey sandwich is fine, thank you, Leo," he said pointedly, directing his thanks to the junior attendant. He unwrapped the sandwich. It was dry and tasteless. He took one bite and wrapped it back up. The final straw came with about 2 hours left in the flight. The cabin was mostly dark passengers, sleeping or watching movies. Messiah was reading his paperback novel. He felt a chill and noticed the air vent above him was blasting cold air. He reached up to adjust it, but the plastic nozzle was stuck. He waited patiently for a flight attendant to pass. It was Leo, collecting trash. "Excuse me," Messiah said quietly, not wanting to disturb the sleeping passenger next to him. "Sorry to bother you, but my air vent seems to be stuck. Any chance you could take a look?" "Of course, sir. Let me see," Leo said earnestly. He stood on his tiptoes and tried to move the nozzle, but it wouldn't budge. "Yeah, that's really jammed. I'm sorry." "Let me see if I can get you an extra blanket." "Thank you. I'd appreciate that," Messiah said. Leo hurried off towards the galley. A minute later he returned, looking dejected. He was empty-handed. Beatrice was right behind him. "We have a problem," she asked, her voice dripping with false concern. "The passenger in 28B is cold," Leo explained. "I was going to get him a blanket." Beatrice let out a theatrical sigh. "Leo, you know we only carry enough blankets for the business class cabin and for medical emergencies. We can't just hand them out to everyone in economy who feels a little chilly. She then looked directly at Messiah. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, though her tone conveyed the exact opposite. "As you can imagine, our amenities are limited in this section of the aircraft. I'd suggest you use your jacket if you're cold." She gestured toward his hoodie. It was the culmination of 1,000 tiny cuts. The dismissiveness at the gate, the condescension about his laptop, the invented rule about the pasta salad, and now the denial of a simple blanket wrapped in a lecture about the hierarchy of the plane. She wasn't just doing her job poorly. She was taking pleasure in reminding him of his perceived station. Messiah simply nodded. "I see. Thank you for clarifying." He didn't put on his hoodie. He sat in the cold, a silent testament to her callousness. He was no longer collecting data. He was drafting a verdict. In the first-class cabin, shielded from the petty dramas of economy, sat Isabella Rossi, a formidable woman in her 50s. She was the lead counsel for the Blackstone Group, the private equity firm that had partnered with Messiah on the Apex Air acquisition. She was on her way to the same board meeting in LA. She had seen Messiah board, giving him a subtle, almost imperceptible nod, which he had returned. She had watched with growing alarm as he was treated with casual disdain. She knew Messiah's methods. He was a silent observer, a corporate anthropologist, and she knew that the crew of Flight 712 was currently blissfully unaware, flying straight into a hurricane. As the plane began its descent into Los Angeles, the familiar chime rang through the cabin. Captain Miller's voice returned as smooth and detached as ever. "Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for arrival." Beatrice walked the aisle, her face set in its familiar mask of weary authority. "Please put your tray tables up and your seats in the upright position." When she passed Messiah, she gave him one last look of disapproval. He simply met her gaze, his expression unreadable. For Beatrice, he was a forgettable annoyance on a long flight. She had no idea that she had just spent 6 hours sealing her own fate and that of her entire crew. The judgment she had so freely passed on him was about to be returned 100-fold. The landing was a gentle kiss on the LAX runway, a textbook execution by Captain Miller. For the passengers, it was the end of a journey. For the crew of Flight 712, it was the end of a routine work day. As the plane taxied to the gate, Beatrice Vance was already mentally running through her post-flight duties, eager to get to her crew hotel for a glass of wine and to complain about the thankless passengers in economy. The seatbelt sign switched off with a final definitive ping. The familiar chaos of deplaning erupted. Messiah remained in his seat, making no move to stand. He let the woman by the window and the man on the aisle exit first, nodding politely. He watched as passengers shuffled past, grabbing bags from overhead bins. He was in no hurry. Beatrice and Leo stood near the exit, bidding farewell to the passengers. Beatrice's smile was back a practiced automatic gesture. "Thanks for flying, Apex. Have a great day." Her eyes glazed over as the river of faces passed by. Finally, the cabin was nearly empty. Messiah slung his backpack over his shoulder and walked slowly up the aisle. As he approached the door, Beatrice saw him coming. Her smile faltered, replaced by a look of slight annoyance, as if his very presence was an inconvenience. "Have a good day," she said, her voice flat, already turning away. "Actually," Messiah said, his voice quiet, but carrying an undeniable weight of authority that made her stop and turn back. "I'd like a moment of your time. Yours and Leo's." Leo looked surprised. Beatrice's expression hardened. "Sir, we have to deplane and prepare for the next flight. If you have a complaint, there's a customer service desk in the terminal. This won't be a complaint for the customer service desk, Messiah said calmly, and it won't take long. I'd also like you to call Captain Miller and the other flight attendant to the jet bridge, please. I believe her name is Chloe. Beatrice's patient snapped. I have no idea who you think you are, but I am not your personal assistant. The captain is busy with post-flight checklists. Now, if you'll please exit the aircraft. Beatrice. The voice was sharp, cultured, and came from behind Messiah. Beatrice's head snapped up. Standing there was Isabella Rossi, the impeccably dressed woman from first class, her expression one of cold fury. Mrs. Rossi, Beatrice stammered, her face paling. She recognized a person of importance, a frequent premium flyer. I'm so sorry. Is there a problem? Was your flight not to your satisfaction? My flight was fine, Isabella said, her eyes like chips of ice. The problem is that you have spent the last 6 hours being spectacularly rude to my colleague and the owner of this airline. The words hung in the air of the silent galley. Leo's jaw literally dropped. He looked from Isabella to Messiah in his simple hoodie and back again, his mind struggling to connect the dots. Beatrice, however, simply stared. Then she laughed, a short, sharp, disbelieving bark. The owner, ma'am, with all due respect, you must be mistaken. She looked at Messiah with utter contempt. This man? The owner? That's ridiculous. Messiah had remained silent during the exchange, his face impassive. Now he spoke. Your disbelief is part of the problem, Beatrice, he said. His voice still quiet, yet it cut through the tension like a razor. You've already judged me. You judged me at the door. You judged me when I asked for coffee, and you certainly judged me when I asked for a blanket. You didn't see a passenger. You saw a stereotype. He pulled out his phone. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He tapped the screen a few times and put it to his ear. David, it's Messiah Thorne. I've just landed. The flight was, shall we say, educational. I need you to conference in the heads of HR and legal affairs right now. No, it can't wait. Beatrice's face had gone from disbelief to a ghastly, chalky white. The name Messiah Thorne echoed in the expensive silence. She was a senior flight attendant. She had seen the memos, the press releases about the recent acquisition. She knew that name. Her entire world was tilting on its axis. Patch them through to the ground operations manager's office at LAX. Messiah continued into the phone. And have airport security meet me at the jet bridge for gate 42B. I need them to escort the entire flight and cabin crew of Apex Flight 712 to that office. Captain Robert Miller. First Officer Evans and flight attendants, Beatrice Vance, Leo Kowalski, and Chloe Jenkins. He paused, listening. Yes, David. All of them. Their employment with Apex Air and all its subsidiaries is terminated effective immediately. Professional conduct review to follow. No severance. This was a direct violation of corporate ethics. Gross misconduct. He ended the call and looked at Beatrice. Her carefully constructed composure had shattered. Her face was a mask of pure horror. Leo looked like he was going to be sick. At that moment, Captain Miller, looking annoyed, appeared from the cockpit. What's the hold-up? I was told I was needed out here. He saw Messiah Isabella and his ashen-faced crew. What's all this, Captain Miller? Messiah said, his voice now taking on a colder, more executive tone. My name is Messiah Thorne. The captain's bravado evaporated. Like Beatrice, he knew the name. He had just never imagined the man attached to it would be wearing scuffed sneakers and a hoodie. Mr. Mr. Thorne, Miller stammered. I had no idea you were on board. It's an honor. If there was any issue with the flight, I assure you. The issue, Captain Messiah cut him off, is that you are the commander of this vessel. You are responsible for everything that happens on it, including the conduct of your crew. And the conduct on this flight was not just poor, it was rotten. It was a culture of elitism and prejudice, and it stops today. You are relieved of your command. Security will escort you to a meeting where the terms of your immediate dismissal will be explained. 2 uniformed airport security officers appeared at the end of the jet bridge, their presence solidifying the nightmare for the crew. Beatrice finally found her voice, a desperate pleading whisper. Please, Mr. Thorne, I have been with this airline for 20 years. It was a misunderstanding. I was just trying to follow procedure. No, Messiah said, his gaze unwavering. You were not following procedure. You invented procedures to exercise a petty and discriminatory authority over a passenger you deemed beneath you. You denied a customer a choice of meal based on a lie. You refused a basic comfort like a blanket based on a class system you enforce. You lectured and belittled not because of rules, but because of your own prejudice. What if I hadn't been the owner? What if I was just a regular person, a man who saved up for a year to fly across the country to see his family? Would he have deserved that treatment? Your actions today told me that you believe he would, and that is why you will never work for my airline or any airline I have influence over ever again. He then turned his gaze to Leo, whose eyes were filled with tears. You, Messiah said, his tone softening almost imperceptibly. You have a choice to make. You followed her lead. You were complicit. I want you to think long and hard about why you did that. You'll be part of the same meeting. He didn't promise him anything, but the slight difference in his tone was a sliver of ambiguity in a sea of finality. He turned and walked off the plane, Isabella Rossi by his side. He didn't look back. The security officers stepped forward, their faces impassive. Captain Miller, Miss Vance, if you'll come with us, please. The quiet, sterile environment of the jet bridge became a courtroom and a gallows all in one. For the crew of Flight 712, the flight had ended. Their careers had just crashed and burned. News of the mass firing on Flight 712 did not just ripple through Apex air, it detonated. Within a day, it was the stuff of corporate legend, a cautionary tale whispered in galleys, cockpits, and break rooms from JFK to Hong Kong. Messiah Thorne's official memo was a masterclass in controlled force. It was concise, cold, and utterly uncompromising. It spoke of a foundational rot in the company's service culture and promised a swift and decisive realignment. The memo was a warning shot, and the 4 terminated crew members were the proof of its deadly accuracy. For them, however, the memo was a distant echo. They were at ground zero, and the fallout was just beginning to settle, poisoning the very air they breathed. Karma, they would learn, was not a sudden, clean execution. It was a chronic illness, a slow, grinding affliction that stripped you of everything you thought you were piece by painful piece. Beatrice Vance. The stripping of the crown. Beatrice stormed out of the termination meeting in a blaze of indignant fury. The words gross misconduct and violation of corporate ethics were to her nothing but corporate jargon to justify the whims of a volatile new owner. She saw Messiah Thorne not as a leader, but as a petulant child king who lashed out because his ego had been bruised. He can't do this. she seethed to her union representative over the phone that night, pacing the length of her immaculate Queen's condo. 20 years I have given 20 years of my life to this airline. I followed procedure. Beatrice, the rep said, his voice heavy with fatigue. Whose procedure did you follow when you denied the passenger a meal choice, when you refused him a blanket? They were economy passengers. We have limited amenities. It's standard practice, she insisted, her voice rising with hysteria. No, Beatrice, it's not, the rep sighed. The official procedure is to provide comfort and service to all passengers to the best of our ability. What you practiced was a caste system, and you did it to the one man on earth who could hold you accountable in an instant. Worse, you did it in front of his lawyer from the Blackstone Group. Her fury curdled into a cold dread. She hired a high-priced employment lawyer, convinced a lawsuit would restore her name and force a massive settlement. She sat in his polished mahogany office, recounting the events of the flight through a lens of self-pity and justification. The lawyer listened patiently, nodding. Then he slid a thick folder across the desk. It was the discovery file from Apex Air. It contained a detailed minute-by-minute log of the flight's events, compiled from Messiah Thorne's own notes. It included a sworn, multi-page statement from Isabella Rossi, corroborating every single detail. It even included passenger feedback scores from that flight, which were abnormally low in her section, with several comments mentioning the senior attendant's condescending attitude. Ms. Vance, the lawyer, said, his tone shifting from sympathetic counsel to blunt pragmatist. You don't have a case. You have a public relations nightmare. Your actions weren't just unprofessional. In the context of a new owner trying to reform a company's image, they were suicidal. My advice is to take the pittance of a severance they're offering and disappear quietly. If you sue, they will countersue for brand damages, and they will bury you. Beatrice left his office feeling like she'd been punched in the soul. Disappearing was not in her nature. Her job was her identity. She immediately began her counter-offensive, applying to every major airline she could think of. Her resume was on its surface impeccable. 20 years of experience, glowing reviews from before the incident safety commendations. Her first interview was with a legacy carrier, Transcontinental Airlines. The HR manager was polished polite, and her questions were like surgical strikes. We pride ourselves on creating a welcoming environment for all our passengers, she said with a placid smile. Can you tell me about a time you had to handle a difficult passenger in the main cabin? Beatrice launched into a canned story, but her heart wasn't in it. She could feel the woman's eyes on her, probing, judging. She knew the woman across the desk knew the real story. The rejection email arrived before she even got home. A phone screening with Lufthansa ended the moment she confirmed her dates of employment with Apex. A long, telling pause on the other end of the line, followed by a hasty, "We will keep your information on file." She knew what that meant. The aviation industry was a small, gossipy village, and she had been branded a witch. The unofficial "do not hire" was as real and as binding as a legal injunction. The months bled into one another. The professional rejections gave way to a more personal and painful kind of isolation. Friends from the airline with whom she'd shared layovers in Paris and gossip over cocktails stopped returning her calls. Her bitterness was a contagion they didn't want to catch. Her life, once a whirlwind of destinations, was now confined to the four walls of her condo, which felt more like a prison every day. The first late notice on her mortgage was a shock. The second was a terror. She began selling her life off in pieces on Facebook Marketplace, the designer handbags, the unworn jewelry, the chic furniture she had bought to project an image of success. Each sale felt like a small death. Finally, 6 months after the flight broke and broken, She took a job she would have once considered an insult. She became a barista at a high-end coffee bar in the lobby of a skyscraper in Manhattan's financial district. The uniform was a brown apron stained with milk and syrup. The work was a special kind of hell, a perfect karmic torture chamber. She who had lauded her authority over others now had none. She served coffee to arrogant bankers and hurried assistants who barked their complicated orders at her, barely making eye contact. She was a ghost, a functional part of the background machinery. One rainy afternoon, the ultimate humiliation arrived. A pair of executives in sharp suits stood by the counter, waiting for their cappuccinos. One of them tapped the front page of the Wall Street Journal he was holding. It featured a smiling photograph of Messiah Thorne. "This Thorne fellow is a certified genius," the man said. "Apex Air was a basket case. Now it's the top-rated airline for customer satisfaction. My wife flew them to the coast last week. In economy, she said it was unbelievable. They gave her a hot towel, a free blanket, and the flight attendant personally came by to ask her how her book was." Beatrice stood frozen, her hand hovering over the espresso machine. The roar of the milk steamer filled her ears. A free blanket. The words were like acid in her throat. She could feel the heat rising in her face, a flush of shame so profound it felt like it might incinerate her on the spot. She finished their drinks, her hands trembling, and placed them on the counter. 2 double-shot skinny vanilla lattes. She mumbled, her voice hoarse. The men picked up their drinks without a glance in her direction, continuing their conversation about Messiah Thorne's triumph as they walked away. Beatrice leaned against the counter, the smell of burnt coffee filling her nostrils, and understood the true nature of her fall. She hadn't just lost a job. She had been erased. Captain Robert Miller. The exile to the ice. For Captain Robert Miller, the firing was an assault on the laws of nature. He was a captain, a commander. Men like him didn't get him fired. They retired with honor and a fat pension. The FAA inquiry was, he assumed, a formality. He walked into the hearing room with the cool, detached confidence that had been his trademark for 25 years. He laid out the flight details with technical precision. Weather was clear. Flight path was optimal. Landing was flawless. When they asked about the crew, he gave a stock answer. "My cabin crew are highly trained professionals. I trust them to manage the cabin so I can focus on flying the aircraft." One of the investigators, a stern-faced woman, looked up from her file. "So in your view, Captain, your responsibility as commander ends at the cockpit door?" "Of course not," Miller bristled, "but I can't be expected to monitor every passenger interaction." "We're not talking about every interaction," the woman countered, her voice flat. "We're talking about a documented pattern of harassment against a passenger perpetrated by your senior flight attendant, which you failed to notice or correct. The final report will cite a critical failure of command and oversight. Your record will be noted." The phrase echoed in his head for weeks. Failure of command. It was a pilot's scarlet letter. He still believed his experience would carry him. He was wrong. At an interview with a major competitor, the final question was the one he dreaded. "Tell us about your departure from Apex." He tried to frame it as a philosophical difference with a hands-on new owner. The interviewer smiled a tight corporate smile. "We see. Thank you for your time, Captain Miller." He knew he would not get a call back. His wife couldn't comprehend it. "What do you mean, they won't hire you?" she demanded over a tense, silent dinner. "You're one of the most senior pilots in the country." Her panic mirrored his own. Their life, their social standings, their entire identity was built on the foundation of his title. A smaller regional carrier offered him a first officer position, a co-pilot. It was a humiliating demotion, a public fall from grace. The interview was with a man 15 years his junior, who had once looked at him with hero worship. Now Miller saw only pity in the man's eyes. Pride, the same fatal flaw that had made him so detached in his command, made it impossible to accept. He walked away. After a year of bleeding savings and enduring his wife's increasingly resentful glares, his options narrowed to one. A cargo airline based in Anchorage, Alaska was hiring. The application was a faceless online form. The interview was a 10-minute video call with a grizzled operations manager who cared only about two things: his license and his willingness to fly long, lonely hours. His new kingdom was the cockpit of a battered, rattling Boeing 747, its cavernous hold filled with shipping containers and the faint smell of machine oil and frozen fish. His uniform was a fleece jacket and work boots. His co-pilots were kids building hours and old-timers who had long since given up on glamour. One frigid winter night, on a long-haul flight to Seoul, over the vast, dark emptiness of the northern Pacific, he stared out at his reflection in the cockpit window. He saw a tired, middle-aged man. He remembered the feeling of his voice over the PA system, that smooth, reassuring baritone that held the fate of 300 souls in its sound waves. He had been a god in that domain, serene and untouchable. But his serenity had been ignorance. He had been so high up, so focused on the horizon, that he had forgotten to look at what was happening in the kingdom right behind him. He had allowed a poison to flourish under his command, all while he flew flawlessly through the calm, empty sky. Now he was truly alone in that sky, a fallen king banished to the cold, hauling the world's cargo in the dark. Leo Kowalski. The Road to Redemption. Leo's fall was different. It was not a plunge from a great height, but a collapse inward. When he returned to his tiny apartment, the silence was a roaring accusation. He was consumed not by anger, but by a sickening, profound guilt. He replayed every moment Beatrice's first sneer, his own feeble attempt to get the blanket, the way he had averted his eyes when she belittled Messiah. He hadn't been cruel, but he had been a coward. And in the moral calculus of that flight, his cowardice had been an essential ingredient. He ignored his parents' calls, ashamed of the man he had become. His dreams of a life in the sky felt childish and undeserved. After a week of spiraling in self-loathing, he realized that blame and despair were dead ends. The only way forward was to face the truth. He sat at his cheap kitchen table and decided to write a letter. It wasn't a plea for his job. It was an act of penance. He crumpled up a dozen drafts, the words feeling hollow and self-serving. Finally, he stopped trying to be eloquent and simply wrote from the heart. "Dear Mr. Thorne," it began, "I am writing not to ask for my job back or to make excuses because there are none. I was the junior flight attendant on Flight 712. I failed you, and I failed in my duties as a human being. I saw what was happening. I saw the disrespect, and I chose the easy path of silence because I was afraid of my senior colleague. That fear doesn't excuse my inaction. It defines my failure. What you experienced was wrong, and I am deeply, truly sorry that I was a part of it. The lesson I learned that day about integrity at my own expense is one I will carry with me for the rest of my life. I hope you are successful in building the airline you envision. You and every passenger deserve it." He addressed it not to Apex Air, but to the corporate headquarters of Etherian Labs. It felt like mailing a confession into the void. He started applying for stocking jobs at grocery stores, his aviation career a dream that had turned to dust. 2 weeks later, his phone rang. An unknown number. "May I speak with Leo Kowalski?" a crisp, professional voice asked. "Speaking." "Mr. Kowalski. My name is Jessica Chen, executive assistant to Messiah Thorne. Mr. Thorne received your letter and would like to schedule a video conference with you tomorrow afternoon, if you're available." Leo's heart hammered against his ribs. He agreed, a sense of terror and hope warring within him. The next day, he sat before his laptop, wearing a button-down shirt for the first time in weeks. Messiah Thorne's face appeared framed not by an airplane window, but by the minimalist art in a sunlit office. "Mr. Kowalski," Messiah said, his voice calm and direct. "Thank you for the letter." "Mr. Thorne, I just want to say again," Leo began. Messiah held up a hand. "Leo, your letter was the only apology I received. Beatrice Vance's lawyer sent threats. Captain Miller's union filed a grievance that was meritless. They still believe they are the victims. You are the only one who understood what truly happened on that flight." He leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "I didn't fire the crew for revenge. I did it because the culture was toxic from the top down. A culture of arrogance and apathy. But a culture is made of people, and people can change. Your letter tells me you are capable of change." "I am, sir." "Leo," said his voice, thick with emotion. "I promise." "Good. I'm not offering your old job back. That chapter is closed. But Apex is building a new state-of-the-art training academy in Texas. We're throwing out the old rule book and designing a curriculum based on a single, non-negotiable principle: human dignity. We need instructors who don't just teach from a manual. We need people who understand in their bones the cost of failing that principle." Messiah paused. "This isn't a reward, Leo. It's a responsibility. I'm offering you a role as a junior instructor. Your first task will be to help design a module based on your experience on Flight 712. You'll have to stand in front of new hires and tell them your story. The story of what you did wrong. Can you do that?" Tears were now streaming freely down Leo's face. It was more than a job. It was a purpose, a chance to transform his greatest shame into a powerful lesson. It was a path not back to where he had been, but to somewhere far better. "Yes," Leo whispered, his voice cracking. "Yes, I can. Thank you, Mr. Thorne. I won't let you down." For Leo, karma hadn't been a fall. It had been a painful, clarifying baptism by fire, and on the other side of it was the rarest of things, a second chance. So what is the moral of this story? Is it just a satisfying tale of a rich man getting his revenge? I don't think so. It's deeper than that. It's a story about the masks we wear and the silent assumptions that poison our interactions. Beatrice Vance and Captain Miller weren't evil people. They were products of a toxic culture. They helped create a culture that judged a person's worth by their seat number instead of their character. They lost their careers not just because they were rude to a billionaire, but because they would have been just as rude to anyone they deemed unimportant. Messiah Thorne's real power wasn't in firing them. It was in what he did next. He didn't just punish the guilty. He rebuilt the entire system to champion the very dignity his crew had denied him. And in Leo Kowalski we see the most powerful lesson of all, that accountability and genuine remorse can build a bridge from your biggest failure to your greatest purpose. I want you to think about the last time you made a snap judgment about someone. We all do it. The question is, what do we do next? This story is a powerful reminder that every person we meet is the main character in their own story, and we have no idea how much power and influence they might truly have. Kindness and respect cost nothing, but as the crew of Flight 712 learned, a lack of them can cost you everything. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think, please do me a favor. Hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that explore the complexities of our world. And please leave a comment below. Have you ever witnessed a situation like this? What would you have done? Let's talk about it. Thank you for listening.